So both of those texts, for free public health care and against free public health care, were both argumentative texts. They were the same kind of, excuse me, same kind of writing, just with different claims, okay? We're gonna look in this over the next couple class periods at 3 different kinds of writing and see if we can make any similarity and difference connections. We're gonna look at a drama, and we're gonna look back at Macbeth for our drama. We're not gonna read it again, but we're gonna revisit some of the ideas in Macbeth and then compare them to an informational text and a persuasive text or an argumentative. So 3 different types of writing to see what kind of ideas we can connect. All right, so what we're gonna do today is we're gonna do the Macbeth part of our graphic organizer. We're gonna do that all together so that you can get a start on what that looks like and hopefully get an understanding of what kinds of things we wanna look at as we're completing this graphic organizer. Does that make sense? Are we good? Okay, so I'm gonna pull it up and show you, and we're gonna fill it out all together. In Canvas, there's an assignment called Step 1, Analyzing Macbeth. You can go ahead and while I'm getting ready, download that graphic organizer if you haven't already and pull it up. And you can fill it in while I'm filling it in. So that way we're doing it all together and you've got a good start on it. Remember, when you're doing a graphic organizer from one of our assignments, you need to save it to your iPad files first so that when you type on it, it'll save the things you're typing. Okay, so one of the reasons I like to use graphic organizers like this to help you organize your ideas is because as you move forward into other English classes, if you take college English and have other rhetorical analysis type classes, you won't always have a graphic organizer to complete before you have to write about an idea. So one of the benefits to getting used to doing something like this is that you get used to organizing your thoughts. It's a way of almost brainstorming before you have to write about something. So when you're asked to do any kind of analysis, think about the major things that we look at when we're reading. We look at theme, we look at tone words, we look at writing style, we look at how information is organized. Make notes about those things before you start to write about it, and it helps give your thoughts some clarity, especially if you have more than one piece that you have to compare. It makes it very easy to see the similarities and differences, okay? So in this particular, over the next couple courses or classes, we're gonna use the same graphic organizer to do 3 texts. The first column is Macbeth. In the second column, you're gonna put the informational text, and I'll release that assignment before your next class. And the third column will be a persuasive text, okay? So the first one we're looking at today, our text is Macbeth. So in the top box, you can put the tragedy of Macbeth. And who wrote Macbeth? Yeah, Shakespeare. Very good. So genre of text refers to what kind of writing is it? So what kind of writing was Macbeth? Is fiction, it's a tragedy, and even in its writing style, was it a book? It's poetic, it's a play, yeah. So for genre, we're gonna say a dramatic tragedy. So in thinking about author's purpose, when you're first learning about author's purpose in middle school, you probably remember learning an acronym for PIE, for thinking about author's purpose. So do you guys remember doing that? Okay, so what did the P stand for? Persuasion, to persuade. What about the I? inform, and the E, entertain. So at the surface level, P-I-E, what was Shakespeare's purpose in writing Macbeth? To persuade, inform, or entertain? To entertain, right? So that's the start of it. But now that we are kind of past that in our thinking, you always want to give more information now with author's purpose as to what they are persuading about, informing about, or entertaining about. And so to give you an example of what that could look like, so if I was writing a persuasive article on why free public health care should be mandatory for all Americans, my purpose is to persuade, but if I was going to write down the purpose, I would say to persuade that healthcare should be free for all Americans, right? We want to tack on more information as to what they're persuading, informing, or entertaining about. So in this case, to entertain, how could we clarify a little more deeply what he was entertaining about? What kind of things would we want to think about in order to think about what is he entertaining us about? And this is a harder question. It causes us to really have to stop and think. So was the play, we already said it was a tragedy. So we know that means the topics were kind of heavy, right? They're heavy topics. Any idea with if we thought about the overall topic that the play was about, if you had to sum it to one or two words, what? Power and greed, okay? Exactly. So he's entertaining us about the dangers of power and greed. That gives us more information as to what he was entertaining about. It's not quite the theme statement, but it uses some of the topical ideas from the theme statement to tell us what he is entertaining about, to entertain about the dangers of power and greed. We also always want to consider who is the audience for the text. And it can be tempting to just think, well, anybody who wants to read, it's the audience. That's not quite what we mean when we think about audience. When we're thinking about audience, we think about who is this writer writing this for, right? Because writers write with a very specific reader in mind. If I was going to write an article on why parents of teenage drivers should pay more attention to what their teen driver is doing in the car, who am I writing that for? Parents, and even more specifically, parents of teen drivers, right? I'm not writing it to parents of toddlers. I'm not writing it to parents of, who now have kids with families of their own. I'm writing it to a very specific audience. So in the same way, even though fiction writers are writing fiction, which seems entertaining, they're writing with an audience in mind. If I was writing a mystery novel, what kind of people would like to read that? Yeah, people who are interested in maybe puzzles, mysteries, confusing, things that cause confusion, those kind of people. Someone who likes just romance novels is not going to pick up my mystery. That's not my reader. So in the same way, the stuff we read, whether it's an informational, persuasive, it's all written for someone, okay? So who would Shakespeare's intended audience maybe be if he was trying to entertain about the dangers of power and greed? Say again? Play critiques, like people, critics. Maybe. Play critiques. Who else? Who would have been going to his plays in his time? Yeah, people who are in power positions, right? So Shakespeare wrote for, his audience was people in maybe upper classes, right? The more rich people, because those are the people with power. High society. Oops. He wasn't writing to the commoner on the street about the dangers of power. That audience would not have related to that. They may have been entertained mildly about it, but the message wasn't for them. So in thinking about intended audience, you're thinking about who is this message for? So our theme, so if we're looking at a literary work, meaning like a fiction or a poem or a drama or a literary nonfiction, we think in terms of theme. What's the message or lesson? If you're looking at something that's an informative article, a persuasive text, something like that, we call it main idea or claim, okay? So for our literary text, we're thinking about theme. How could we design a theme that would fit what Macbeth was about? What's one way we could put the theme idea together in a sentence? Say again? Our word choice? Okay, so yes, I'm not sure. We are going to look at his word choice in just a minute. For this box on the thing, let's talk about a theme sentence, just a sentence that puts together what the theme of Macbeth was, the lesson we learned. So when it took over Macbeth, what was the result? Betrayal, death, destruction, those things, right? So power and greed can lead to betrayal, death, and destruction. Yeah. So that's the lesson we learn. It's not just about power and greed. That's the topic. But what do we learn about it? Power and greed can lead to death and destruction. That is for sure one way to say it. And usually with theme sentences, if you're asked to write about a theme, there's not any one like exact way to word it or way it has to be. Like your sentence might be different from your sentence and how you say it. You just want to make sure that it's a lesson that you can learn from this text. Okay, and so we do have evidence to support this theme because we saw how the quest for power or the desire for more power led to the destruction of Macbeth and his family, right? We could go back to the play and get specific lines where the people actually died. We could find that evidence. So we're not going to do that for our purposes here, but we're going to say for our evidence, so his focus on becoming king caused him to kill his friends, and it led to his own death and the death of his wife. That's our evidence to support how power and greed can lead to betrayal, death, and destruction, right? So when you guys go on and you complete the informational article and the persuasive article, you're going to be looking for the main idea. What's the author's main idea for this piece or the author's claim? And then what evidence in that text supports the claim that you put in the field above it. So I'll give you guys a second to go ahead and get that on your chart. Hey. It is. I don't. Okay. I have, if you need blank paper, you can tear something out of here. The check marks are the kids in the room. This column of check marks, the Z's are those that are on my Zoom. Okay. So is everybody good? Caught up? You guys on Zoom, you good? Okay. So each type of writing, if I'm writing a drama, if I'm writing a poem, if I'm writing an article, there's characteristics or things I do as I'm putting those words together that are going to be unique to the type of genre I'm writing. Okay. So what I mean by that, so let's think about a drama. When you look at a drama, what are some things that tell you it's a drama, that you know you're reading a drama and not an article? Yes. Character list, exactly. So let's put that character list. Characters, and you said they're spoken lines, right? What else? What other things do? Dialogue. Dialogue, yep. A lot more dialogue than when you're reading other types of work. Stage directions, yep. You won't find those in an article. Anything else come to mind? Yeah, exactly. The emotions are spelled out for us, right? So we get emotions, any props, kind of that setting information is given to us. If I was reading a poem, how do I know a character's how do I know the speaker's emotions in a poem? There's a narrator, right, in a poem and in other writing. What are some other ways, like if this was a poem or something else, we would know? From the diction, the word choices, right? Those kind of things. And yes, drama has word choices and things, but like we said, it's spelled out usually how they're feeling or how they're acting, right? Okay, so good. Now, when you're thinking about your informational article and you're persuasive and you get to this part of the chart, think about those things that make it unique, that you know you're reading an informational article or something else as opposed to a poem or a drama or a fiction, okay? All right, and so the last part of our graphic organizer is to think about the unique choices that this author made in this text that are worth noting, okay? And so Shakespeare, definitely his writing style is going to be different from the informational article and the persuasive text you read. But let's think about some of the ways that we talked about how Shakespeare writes and puts words together. So do you remember that we talked about one of his writing styles for his lines was to use a very rhythmic style of writing that's sometimes found in poetry and sonnets and other things? Do you remember what that's called? It's like da 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 da, like that kind of rhythm or feeling. Do you remember those two words? The rhyme scheme. It's, yes, I'm referring to the rhyme scheme, but Shakespeare's style of writing, he often wrote in what's called iambic pentameter. Do you remember that? So that is one of his unique word choices, is he wrote in iambic pentameter. Do you remember how many syllables iambic pentameter has in a line? 10. Yeah, it has 10 syllables. So iambic pentameter was a common writing choice in Shakespeare's time because of the rhythm of the lines. When someone was on stage speaking lines that were written in iambic pentameter, they had a much more artistic feel to them than other types of dialogue. Like in Romeo and Juliet, one of the most famous lines is, "But hark, what light through yonder window breaks." 10 syllables. So often in Shakespeare's lines, parts of the drama that were really important and he wanted to emphasize, he switches to writing in iambic pentameter so that the reader remembers it, right? So that is a unique word choice. Do you remember we talked about how Shakespeare structures his sentences? How often he takes the predicate or the last part of the sentence and places it before the subject, that inverted sentence structure, right? So instead of saying the teacher is sitting at the desk the teacher sits, right? He flips the action with the subject, and that's a unique author choice. So we call that inverted sentences. You're not going to see that in your articles you read. Okay. We also, in many of Shakespeare's plays, we find dramatic irony. Okay, so when you're looking at the informational article and the persuasive article, think about also any strong tone or mood words that are in that text. So in Macbeth, what was the tone of Macbeth? What was the overall feeling we had as we read it? Suspenseful. Okay, yes, definitely. There was suspense. What else? Very somber, wasn't it? Yeah, Shakespeare dealt with heavy topics: betrayal, death, gloom. Yes. Anything else come to mind in terms of greed? Oh, grief. Did you say grief? Or you said grief? Okay, I'll change that to, it was about greed too, but grief is the emotion word. Yep. Okay. I'm also going to put, because as a strategy, and we do get it from the iambic pentameter, listing that, but he wrote the text was written to be spoken aloud. So he used a lot of alliteration in some of his lines and sounds that would be pleasing to the ears. So we're going to say appeal to sound. Okay. So next class period, I will open up the assignment on the text that you'll read and analyze for the center column of this chart, which will be the informational text, okay? And if you want, you could go ahead and write informational text in the genre. And then the third column is going to be persuasive, so that you can remember that. And then, so next class period, you'll do the informational text, read it, go through the same thought process. And it's a bit more complex. It's a scientific informational text. So look for, and it's coming out of the textbook. So like use the little helps in the textbook, use the rollover features to get word definitions, and look at the questions being asked in the text. You don't have to complete them, but they'll help draw your attention to some of the main ideas, okay? And I don't mind if you work together, but make sure the answers that you put are your answers for that. And then for the persuasive text, I'll release that one for the next class period, and that you'll go through the same process. Then when I'm back here next week on Thursday and Friday, we're going to look at our completed charts and make some connections and ideas so that you can write about them. Does that make sense? Any questions at all? Okay, so this chart I will upload so that you can come back and refer to it if you need to. I'm going to put the video for today's teaching also up, so those who aren't here, and if you need to go back and hear anything again, you'll be able to do that. If you don't have any work that you owe me, you can work on something else that you might have for another class. But if you haven't finished the SAQ for our argumentative texts, now we have some time, might be a good time to work on that. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay.
I